Another episode of Bet on It with Jerry and Jordan. I'm Jerry, and who are you?
I don't know. The other one.
All right. Since we were last with you guys, the MLB, I believe, has kicked off or hit off or whatever you want to call it. We were in the first couple weeks of the season then. NHL playoffs and NBA playoffs are in full force now. We're in the conference final round of the NBA, and we're in the
Mhm.
second round of the NHL. But since our last show, the NFL schedule has released, so we'll go over a couple games that we like on the schedule. I mostly just stuck to week one because I'm sure as the season goes on, we'll talk more each week about it. But I got a couple games I like in week one, and then a little other something else that I want to talk about too with the schedule. But let's kick it off with some bets that we like or what we have been hitting on or just missing on. And I'll let you take it over with the MLB because that's your category right there.
Yeah, and absolutely nothing exciting happening in the NHL right now, so we don't have to talk
Nope,
about that.
nothing at
But
all.
yeah, I mean, I've been pretty good. I've been at the numbers that I've been wanting to be. I'm still just doing the little two-leg with the over/under totals, and then betting with the spread. Yeah, well, it depends on the spread, but sometimes I bet just straight up. But either way, it's just two legs. It's about at 55%, which I've talked before. If you're at 53, you consistently stay profitable. So
Yeah.
I don't know, just kind of slowly building up the bank, 5, $10 a day at a time. I upped my ante a little bit. A lot of them were, I was just doing $5. Now I'm at 10 now. Um, it's been an interesting season overall. Run totals are down pretty significantly this season. I've been taking the under a lot more. They haven't changed the lines. A lot of them tend to be around 8 to 10 depending on the pitching matchup that day. And interestingly enough, I haven't seen that overly adjusted based on the run totals this year in baseball. So I've been going with the under a lot more frequently, and it's been, I haven't seen the odds come out recently if there's just been more unders hitting the season overall, but without looking at the numbers, I would say there's a pretty high likelihood that it has been. So that's
Do you find
something.
yourself hitting? Do you find yourself betting on unders in higher over under games and then just giving yourself a little bit more leeway, or do you find yourself in the
Yeah, a
lower
lot
ones?
of times this season, if I see one, you'll every once in a while, if they're playing at a field like Coors Field, which typically has a lot of runs, I'll still take the under because a lot of those games are still low scoring compared. So, I mean, there's going to be days when obviously it doesn't hit, but on the whole, it's been a lot more consistent. I'll take the under on 7 and 8s if it's a pitching matchup that I'm really confident in, where both pitchers have a strong history against opposing batters. But even once in a while, you can get tricked by pitching matchups, which I talked about this a little bit when the season first started. You could have, Jacob DeGrom going, which is a terrible example because he hasn't even pitched this season, but you could have him going against a really terrible team. But every once in a while, you'll see it where maybe he's really struggled against the Pirates batters for whatever
Yeah.
reason. For what, they just have his number. They see his pitches better. It could be a whole host of different things, but you get tricked by those, and those are the ones where I tend to find nice advantages. Where if you bet on in that example, probably something like that would be Pirates plus 1.5. I'll take the Pirates plus 1.5. I'm not confident enough to bet on them straight up against a top tier pitcher like that, but I find myself hitting on a lot of bets like that because you see it from the outside and you're like, oh, well, of course I'm not going to take the Pirates, but a lot of times they can be sneaky. And I really, those are my favorite bets in baseball is diving a little more into the numbers of a pitching matchup like that and finding little angles. Okay, the pitcher really struggles. Maybe the batters are really struggle against a lower end pitcher because it can go the other way too. You can see pitchers that tend to really struggle on the whole, but they find themselves with a different level of success. So that's just a little side note there. I found myself recently looking at some futures bets. We're about a fifth of the way through the season now, which
It's
baseball.
flying by.
I'm a huge baseball fan, but it flies by. But at the same time, it is legitimately the longest regular season ever, and there's still a lot that can change. So this is the time of year where the Mets are a great example. I'm a big Mets fan, but They have a lot of injuries right now. Max Scherzer just went down. So I was actually looking this morning to see what the odds were for the division. The Mets are still holding pretty strong, but I think it's kind of interesting because you have the Braves at plus 320 to win the division, the Phillies at plus 500, and the Braves' odds of making the playoffs are actually with plus odds right now. And very rarely are you going to see that this early in the season from the defending World Series champion. So as much as I don't want to root for the Braves, I think I kind of like betting on them to make the playoffs at this point. They're starting to, I don't want to say play better, but they've been 5-5 in their last 10 games, which isn't much to write home about, but they're below 500 on the season. So they're starting to heat up a little bit. They're getting a little healthier. Um, I don't know if I'm confident enough to bet. The Mets have a pretty heavy lead right now. They're 7 games ahead of the Phillies, so I'm not sure if I'm confident enough to take anybody else with a 7-game lead, even though I've seen the Mets blow many, many division leads in way more than I should have in my lifetime. So it's very possible, but yeah, I like the Braves, who are actually fourth in the division right now, to take a playoff spot. I still think they have strong pitching. Um, their offense has actually been what's been holding them back. They've just been very inconsistent this year, but it's been kind of a theme across all of baseball. So that was one that kind of stood out to me, and I'll kind of monitor it this time of the year. The one I really am kicking myself because I picked the Brewers to win the World Series before the season. Don't tell Caveman that, but um, I think if you remember, they started off the season really struggling,
Yeah,
and their odds to win the World Series like tanked the first week of the season because, in the sports betting world and the sports world in general, we're
everybody
known for
panics.
overreacting to literally everything. It could be Corbin Burns looked at a fan funny, and all of a sudden their World Series odds did. It's just ridiculous. So I was looking at some of their odds to just even win the division at that point, and they were tanking fast, and I didn't put any money on it, and I'm really kicking myself. But that's why this is the time of year where check out the odds, because you have to keep in mind it's a long baseball season. So if you see odds significantly changing for a team that you believe in, I'm all in on making bets like that, whether it's making the playoffs, whether it's winning the division, winning the World Series, winning the NL, whatever it is. I think this is a great time of year for it. The other thing to keep in mind is some of those teams that are kind of borderline contenders around the trade deadline. Those are teams that tend to be very aggressive. So those odds could shoot up if they make a big move. So I think this is the time of year over the next 2 months before month and a half now before the trade deadline to get a little more aggressive with futures bets. I haven't personally made any yet. I'm probably going to make one on the Braves if I can find the platform to do it because I've seen the odds floating around. But
Yeah,
um, that's the struggle sometimes in New York. But the only other one that I think really stuck out to me was probably the Padres. Depending on what platform you're betting on, they're around plus 400 to win the division right now. They're only a game and a half out of first place behind the Dodgers. And I know everybody wants to bet on the Dodgers, but something really promising for the Padres is that Fernando Tatis still hasn't played. I mean, their best player is yet to make his season debut, and they're only a game and a half out of first place. So that's a team right now. I think that's a perfect example of capitalizing and we don't know when he's going to return, if he's going to return. I would say, especially with them being a playoff team, to expect to see him towards the end of the year. But I mean, that's a perfect example of maybe and I haven't looked at what their World Series odds are right now, but they're a pretty complete team. Under the radar, the Padres could win the World Series. So putting an under the radar bet like that, as soon as Tatis comes back, those odds are going to fly and skyrocket within minutes of that announcement coming out. Even if he starts rehabbing in the minor leagues, the odds are going to change significantly for the Padres. So that's another one that stuck out to me. But I think that's it. That's 10 minutes of baseball talk.
yeah.
I'm going
And
crazy here.
I don't have the odds in front of me either, but another team I just want to throw in there and get your thoughts on because of how they're built is Toronto. They're currently
Hmm.
third in their division. Obviously, the Yankees are one of the best teams in baseball, leading that division. But that's another one that because they're third in their division behind the Yankees, behind Tampa, odds probably won't think that they have a chance to win the division, but maybe a chance to win the chance to get to the playoffs would be an option there at plus odds possibly.
Yeah, if they have plus odds on it, the thing with the American League right now, it is very competitive. So I could see the Blue Jays, their odds being lower than I would think for making the playoffs. If it was a plus odds, I would 100% bet on it, them making the playoffs. Hey, that's the name of the show. Great
It only
job,
took 9
Stove.
episodes to say it.
Fantastic work. But yeah, no, the Blue Jays, they're a good example. I mean, the thing people need to remember about the Blue Jays is this is still a very young team that's learning how to play together. Their pitching has been an issue over the last few years. It's still they made some adjustments to it this offseason, but it's still been their kryptonite this early on. So that's a good example of a team, though, who I would imagine they're going to be very aggressive in targeting a pitcher at the trade deadline because that's their biggest. I mean, they have no problem scoring runs on the whole. So, and they've scored less than people have expected this year, but they have too much talent for that to not turn around, in my opinion. So I would more think that they're going to probably target pitching. Um, and if they do, their odds are going to shoot up. I don't think that I'm confident enough in them taking the division. The Yankees have a pretty hefty 7.5 game lead, and even the Rays are they're the Rays. They're going to be consistently good throughout the entire year, and they're going to find themselves in the 90 win category. So, yeah, I don't think I'd be confident enough to bet on them winning the division or making it overly far because they're a young team. And I tend to bet with pitching because historically, when you look at the playoffs, the teams that win are always the teams that have great rotations. Usually, teams are only playing with their top three pitchers. They just rotate and burn those guys to death through the entire postseason, and they ride them to a championship. So, uh, I don't know if the Blue Jays necessarily fit that category, but yeah, they're a team that I still see making the playoffs.
All right. Any bets you like this weekend? Before we get on to before we get on to the NBA, of course, with baseball, pretty much 14, 15 games a day. We had
Yeah.
a couple of rainouts or weather outs today. I don't know what the problem in Colorado was, but New York had a rain out, so both
Hmm.
both actually New York teams were affected. The Mets are in Colorado. The Yankees are at home against Chicago. I think the doubleheader for the Mets is tomorrow. The
Hmm.
doubleheader for the Yankees is on Sunday. Um, but outside of those two games, any other games that you're monitoring that for this weekend that you would put some money on?
I haven't. So I bet every single baseball game every day. So I do
All
my
right.
two leg on every single game. So I'm looking at every single one. But typically with rainouts, you'll see pitching matchups get a little pitchers will get moved up, they'll get moved back, and you'll see just the pitching matchup change quite a few times over the next few days with rain out. So I haven't done anything in depth yet. I'll do it the morning of, and even sometimes I'll check some mornings and the pitching matchup isn't finalized. And a lot of times I won't bet on those games because I need a little more
Yeah.
information for me personally. Because as much as we're gambling, I like to think that I am at least an informed gambler.
Yeah. Yep. Got a couple really good series going on. That Chicago New York series is going to be good, I think. And then obviously with Colorado and the Mets having the offense that they have, we can see a lot of runs in those games there out in Colorado with that field. Moving on to the NBA. Currently, right
Mhm.
now, Dallas and Golden State are kicking off for game two. Dallas has a hefty lead at halftime. Well, not really
They
hefty, it's
do.
14 points. It seems like this round has been, we're only 3 games in between the two series, but with this game included, this being the fourth game, 14-point lead, it's been it's been all one-sided.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this conference finals so far?
Yeah, I tend to favor teams that are a little more experienced when we get this far into it. I have a hard time betting against the Warriors winning this series. I do think that Luca will probably will his way to at least 2 wins in this series. He's been very hot this postseason, and he's the kind of guy. I mean, realistically, you could see him carry them all the way to the finals. But the Warriors just have such a balanced attack, and they've been here, they've done that. They tend to make adjustments really well. Steve Kerr, I think, will have a plan to try to counter what Luka can do. So I personally have a hard time betting against the Warriors in the season or in the series overall. I would probably have it at 4-2. The Miami Boston one is very, very interesting. I think that's a very tough series to choose. I was looking at just some of the numbers broken down before the series started, and it is super evenly matched. I mean, this has the makings of a 7-game series, in my opinion. In that case, game seven is going to be played in Miami, so I tend to favor that team. Once again, I mean, they're a team that has a little more experience. The Celtics are young overall. This is the furthest that this core of Tatum and Brown and Smart have made it. So it's a brand new experience for them. So I would tend to favor Miami at this juncture as well. And then actually, I had Miami going to the finals in the preseason. I'm not going to mention who I had winning the whole thing because they got eliminated in the first round, but that's okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I liked the way that Miami is constructed, and I think that they have a good chance to win it all this year. So I personally at this point would favor Miami.
So, I mean, if the score obviously holds up
Hmm.
in tonight's game, we're like I said, we're at halftime. We're looking at going into the weekend with both series tied at 1. Tomorrow's game, Saturday, the Celtics would be the home team, and then Sunday the Mavericks would be the home team. If you were to throw together a little two-leg parlay here, who would you go between these two teams? You thinking Heat and Warriors both on the road?
Yeah, most likely. The thing that I'll kind of be intrigued to see is what the over/under totals are. That'll be something that I'll monitor. These games so far seem to have been, I believe they've hit the over so far. I
Yeah, they
don't
were
remember.
definitely lopsided games. I'd have to go double check on the over. Right now, they're at. I mean, the game currently right now is at 130, so another 90 points or so would hit today's over.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been lopsided, but there's still been a lot of points scored. So I am not 100% sure what the over/under, but with the travel schedule, I tend to, and I talked about this forever ago with traveling, and this isn't necessarily a back-to-back situation, but just with a travel schedule like this, I tend to favor the under in matchups like this. Historically, you see the odds are better of it hitting the under, so I would probably go with the Heat and the Warriors, and I would, depending on the lines, obviously, I'd have to see what they are, but I would probably favor the under on both of them right now.
All right. Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. I mean, it's nice to see the Warriors, or not the Warriors, but the Mavericks play a little stronger today after getting
Hmm.
blown out in game one. Luca is definitely on a mission, but I think that just overall, it's just one of those teams where they're they're going to learn from this experience. I mean,
Yep.
they can always make the finals. Obviously, I'm not going to count them out, but I got to put the edge in the Warriors' favor. But they're going to learn from this experience, and hopefully they can make the moves that they need to make over the offseason, and then just be right back here next year. Kind of like what we were thinking with Memphis and Minnesota. Like those are two very young teams, very young cores. But
Hmm.
there's still some holes and some pieces that need to be filled out. It's up to the GMs and coaches of those teams to fill those pieces and see if they can compete with the Suns and the Warriors and I hate to say it, but the Lakers because of all the star power that they got there next year in the Western Conference, as opposed to just being 4 games and out or something. Which obviously
Yeah.
Dallas isn't, but they're going up against some juggernauts right now.
Yeah, I mean, every year we tend to see, and it's not always to the conference finals, but we tend to see one of these young teams that surprise. Last year it was the Hawks. The Hawks made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, another young team, and I mean they kind of imploded this year, so it's not the greatest example. But the Mavericks are overall I mean, they're actually not that young of a team. I mean, you have Luca, who's only 23, but they have a lot of veterans. But this team is not built right now to win a championship. They have Luca, but behind him, you're talking about just a bunch of role players. And typically, when you don't really have that strong second force in today's NBA, it's just you don't win a championship with that construction anymore. I'm all for old school basketball. That's my style. I wish it was back to the days where I loved the early 2000s Pistons, who just had a bunch of solid players with Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, Tayshaun Prince, all those guys, Rip Hamilton. But it's just that's not how the NBA is played anymore. It's a very star-heavy league. I do like some of the. I was very high on the Mavericks actually this off season. I had them ranked fourth in the West coming into this season, which was a lot higher than other people. I didn't have them. I had them making it to the second round of the playoffs. I definitely didn't have them making it this far, but yeah, they're still at least another. It doesn't have to be a superstar, but at least a star level player to play alongside Luca. And if we know Mark Cuban, I'm pretty confident he'll go out and get
Just
that
find one
done.
on Shark Tank, probably.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean, only 2 series going on in the NBA, so not much to talk about there. Moving on to the NHL, they're still in the second round, so double the games.
Mm.
You got Avalanche at Blue. Well, for Saturday, we got the Avalanche at the Blues. This is a lone game tomorrow. And then on Sunday, Panthers at Lightning, Hurricanes at Rangers, Flames at Oilers. Currently, the Rangers and the Hurricanes are on right now, so that series is currently 1-0 Carolina. It's also 1-0 Carolina in the game about halfway through the third period. So if the Rangers don't score, then Carolina will take a 2-0 series lead to New York. And then the late night game, which should be kicking off in about another 10-15 minutes, is Edmonton and Calgary. So right now, Calgary has the 1-0 series lead and just a back and forth. Well, not really back and forth. Calgary was also like a 5-1 or 6-2 lead before Edmonton started to come back. They ended up tying it, and then the Flames put in another 3. So it was a 9-6 final in that game one, which is, and going back to the regular season, I think the game before that between the two teams was like 8-5. And these are, I mean, the Flames goalie led the league in shutouts this year, so it was kind of weird to, like, I even joked about it the other day in an NHL chat group that I'm in, that I was like, you guys realize that this Flames Oilers game 2 is probably going to be like a 2-1 final now. We're not going to get another 9-6 game. I mean, Edmonton's goalie, he's been around the league for a while, Mike Smith, and he's a good goalie, but I wouldn't rank him in the top half of the 8 remaining goalies that are left. And then Markstrom on the other side, he is a solid goalie. So I'm not saying it's going to be like a low scoring affair. Like I said, I joked about it, but Edmonton needs their offense in order to compete in this series, and Calgary is a cup favorite. But like I said, going into tomorrow, we got the Avalanche at the Blues. Avalanche was a cup favorite. They still are a cup favorite, but they lost in game 2, 4-1. So now they go back to St. Louis tied at 1. And then Sunday, you got the Lightning going back home to Tampa Bay with a 2-0 series lead. They took both of them down in Florida, games 1 and 2. And then the other 2 games later on Sunday, the 1-0 series lead for Carolina, 1-0 for Calgary. I'm still leaning Avalanche, even though they looked like buns in game 2. It's hard to say, like, that both of those games, I believe, hit the under too. I think it was. I'd have to double check on it did go to overtime. I think it was 2-1 in game 1, and then 4-1 in game 2. So only 5 goals in game 2. So that's shaping out to be a low scoring series. Going back to St. Louis, I'm taking the Avalanche to win. If I'm doing one of your Jordan kind of parlays, or I'm picking a team and picking an over/under, I'd probably go with the Avalanche and the under. I'm assuming it's going to be around 6. It might even be up now. I could double check. A lot of over/unders are between like 6 and 6.5. Don't really see a lot that are more than that. But the goal with like the flow of how it's going, and it looks like, it's actually 6.5. So I'd be comfortable taking that, getting like a 4-1, 3-2 score, something like that. And then I'm definitely going with the Lightning. Lightning have all the momentum right now. The Panthers, they finished the season as the number 1 team in the NHL, but the Lightning, they've been here before. They're going for their 3rd straight championship. They got all the experience. I'd probably say that their goalie is the top goalie that's left remaining in the playoffs. Vasilevsky, he's had some rough games in these playoffs so far, but I mean, when it gets down to it, like you were talking about with basketball and experience, it's the same thing with hockey and the experience. You're gonna like they could score from all over. They got guys on their third defensive unit that would be on other teams' first defensive unit. They're just overall, they're just like I kind of have like a I don't want to say that I'm not a fan of theirs, but like I like when they're on TV and if it's not my team playing, and I'll just sit there and I'll enjoy watching them because they're a fun team to watch. And
Mm.
if you're a new hockey fan or if I'm trying to get somebody into the sport, I'm probably going to point you into the direction of a Lightning game or an Oilers game and say, watch this team and see how it goes because you're bound to get some goals. You're going to see some star power, and their goalie is great. So I'm leaning Lightning in that one. That the over under that was pretty tough too. They got it at 6.5. I'd probably I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you have any opinions on it, but I can't put an over under on it because I'd rather just go with the Lightning. I might be more comfortable just taking the Lightning -1.5 at home as opposed to
Mhm.
doing the Lightning in the over under. So just take like the -1.5 or -110 odds or whatever it is,
Mhm.
and maybe pair it with the Avalanche money line. But anything on those two games?
I mean, the thing that I tend to see in the playoffs, just and this goes really for any sport, I've always said this, is you tend to see a lot of adjustments that get made in these longer 7-game series. So in that case, I tend to favor the defensive side of things. So I tend to favor the under because I don't want to say assume, but I guess assume a little bit that the opposing defense is going to become adjusted to the other team's offensive sets. So in something like this, I would probably favor the under. I'm all about kind of the boring things and when I'm betting
Of
on
course you
hockey,
are.
basketball, the defensive side of things. So I'm all about the goaltending. So I've looked at quite a bit at these goaltending matchups, and I haven't bet on any hockey this postseason because I'm just not confident enough, honestly. I mean, you already got me to bet on golf that one time, and I picked the winner, I guess. I can't even remember his name. Oh, Scotty there. Oh, Scotty boy. That won the Masters. But yeah, if it's not in my wheelhouse, and that's where I think people get too cute, honestly. I mean, I like to stay in my wheelhouse. I just that's the way that I bet. If you don't have enough knowledge or you don't know how to look at the information that you need to make a decently informed bet, then I think you're just wasting your time. And that's kind of my opinion is I don't want to spend the time diving in to make an informed hockey decision. So I tend to stay away from it. And I think that's a good lesson just across the board is I'll see people throwing in groups like I'm going to put together this 3-sport parlay and I'm like, "Did you watch a hockey game this year?" No. I mean, do you know could you name one of the goaltenders in the matchup? No. I mean, then just stay away from it. So,
Throw money away. So I
but yeah.
was wrong about the scores from game ones, but they were it was 3-2 in the first Colorado game, which still hit the under. The Panthers and Lightning game was the 2-1 first game and then 4-1 second game. So both of those hit the under too. So we've been looking at both unders in both of those games. Um, which I mean, if you're just riding trends or think it's still going to be more of a defensive battle, the under would be the way to go. But like I said, I'd probably just lean towards the Lightning and the Avalanche, both money line, maybe in a two-leg parlay. You are looking at Saturday, Sunday, so I don't know if you want to split your days up. I personally don't like doing that. I'd rather
Mhm.
just bet all the games on one single day, and if I
Same.
win, then throw the money on the next day. But with
That's a good point too to just make in general though what you said is I mean if you're not confident in it, don't force yourself to pick an over under. I mean
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with just betting on the game straight up and taking the with the points.
because
There's
what
nothing wrong with that.
and what you said is exactly right though. Like these teams, like you're looking at the Lightning who scored a bunch of goals throughout the season, Edmonton who could pretty much score at will. But when you get to the playoffs and you're playing the same team three, four, five
Yeah.
times and back to back to back, it's like okay, you do tend to learn some tendencies.
Yep.
And now you're
You're
not going to go out there and you're not going to completely shut down Connor McDavid. I mean, he's the best
yep.
player in the league, but you can certainly help and certainly try. And he's not going to go out there and score 5 goals by himself to hit the over. Um, And then as far as the other two games, Hurricanes at Rangers, I've been on the Hurricanes pretty much all playoffs so far. Which if I would have bet them every single game in round one, they went 7, so I would have won 4, lost 3, and then game 1 would have made me even, and now game 2 of this round would have probably is going to make me lose. But I think that the Rangers are. Let's see if the score updated yet. It's still 1-0. I mean, the Hurricanes are definitely one of the better teams. They've been one of the more consistent teams throughout the year. The Rangers are a little bit more of a surprise, but they've got some great goaltending out there. And even both games have been low scoring so far. It's 1-0 into the third. More than 50 minutes have been played into the third period here, and I think game 1 was 2-1 in overtime too. They needed overtime to win that game. Yeah, 2-1. Carolina won that game. But I mean, there's definitely some offense on both sides. Defense is where both of these teams really shine. I probably lean the Rangers going back home, especially if they're going down 2 games to none. I don't really see them going down 3 games to nothing. So I would lean the Rangers in this one and probably go with the under, unless they throw like some super low 4.5, 5 goal under on it. If they go that low, then I might go the over, even though it has a tendency to go with a 2-1 final.
Is that a game where you think even with the Rangers at home, they'll be an underdog, or do you think they'll be favored?
That's a good question. And actually, I wanted to bring something up to you because I noticed that the Tampa and Florida game, the money line is a pick 'em. Basically, they're both -110. And you can actually get Tampa at +1.5 goals right now, but it's -250 the odds. But so they're not really saying that Tampa is necessarily the underdog in that one, but they're the home team in their game, and you're able to get a goal and a half from them, even though you're paying for -250 odds. I would think that especially if the Hurricanes win tonight, I think they'll be a slight favorite on the road in that one. But it's not going to be like it'll probably be. You probably get the +1.5 goals for the Rangers, probably the same kind of odds, and then the money line will probably be like +110 for the Rangers and maybe -105, 110 for the Panthers or for Carolina.
Okay.
It'll be something close. Like it's not like
I'll be tempted to pick the Rangers straight up, I think.
It's not.
I also am a
either
big
way.
believer in momentum, which they clearly have a lot. I mean, even if they go down 2 games to nothing, there's a lot of momentum on their side.
For the Hurricane, yeah, for the Rangers, yeah,
Rangers, yeah.
for sure. And then the Flames and Oilers, like I said, it was a crazy game to begin with. Mike Smith was pulled within the first like 7 minutes of the game. Actually, I don't think he made it out of the first period.
And he had 2 shutouts in round 1 too. He was good.
Yeah. No, he's a good goal. He's 40 years old. He's been around the league for a long time.
I couldn't believe that. I just was looking up. I know in that fantasy hockey league we played in, I had a weird relationship with Mike Smith where I kept picking him up and dropping him this season. But yeah, I didn't realize he was 40 years old. Holy cow!
He has been around a while. I don't know how many teams he's played for because he has been. He does have some longevity with some teams, but I can't, like, off the top of my head. Calgary comes to mind. Obviously, Edmonton comes to mind. He might have played down in Arizona too, but it's not. I mean, he was with some teams for a good number of years.
It's been with 5 teams.
I don't think. Did I have 3 of those right?
Dallas, Tampa, the Coyotes, Calgary, Edmonton.
Yeah, Coyotes, Calgary, Edmonton, Dallas, and Tampa. I forgot about. Actually, I remember Tampa. I don't remember Dallas at all. But the Flames and the Oilers, I mean, that's another. That series. Like, I don't know if you talk to a lot of hockey people or not, but that's actually like that's a heated rivalry. The Battle of Alberta. Those 2 cities are really close to each other up there in Canada. And they, like, just for years, even though the teams really haven't been that great, because Canada loves their hockey, those games are always like must see on. I mean, you kind of have to get like the Canadian channel that we get around here to watch them, or Hockey Night in Canada, before this year, because now games are on ESPN and all that other jazz. But before this year, you kind of had to have those local Canadian channels to watch them. and they're always like late night games because they're out in the West Coast. But those are some good games, even without the star power name. And now there is guys like the Flames have pretty much, or no, it's the Panthers that has everybody from the 2014 class. They seem to grabbed everybody early on in that class, but the Flames have some firepower. Johnny Gaudreau, and then Oilers have the best center in the league in Connor McDavid. Like I said, I don't think any more games are going to be 9-6 finals. You're probably going to get some high scoring, maybe like some 5-3 finals, 5-4, but there'll definitely be a lot closer. They are in Calgary tonight, and then Sunday they go to Edmonton. So, like I said, they should be dropping the puck. Probably getting underway right now. They usually start around like 10:38, 10:39. So that should be a fun game to watch, and probably watch it after we get off of here. But any thoughts on that game at all? Personally, I'd probably go Edmonton. Again, one of those things where I could probably see them winning tonight. But even if they go down 2-0, the same philosophies as that I had with the Rangers, I don't see them going down 3-0 at home. They're a good enough team. They're right behind Calgary in the standings this year, so I think it's going to be. I think that series realistically has a chance to go 7.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a game where even after that high scoring affair, I'd probably go the under as well. I'd imagine there was a lot of choice words said by both head coaches in the locker room that night. So that's the perfect example of me of adjustments being made. I just can't imagine both sides coming out not strong defensively after a showing like that. I mean, it's embarrassing. So I would lean wildly on the under, living on the wild side.
Living on the wild side. Mike Smith actually gave up the least amount of goals that game. Um, Moving on to the NFL, we're gonna over the next few. Well, we're not on every week, but over the next few episodes that we're on, we're going to do different futures and talk about different stats between different players that we got and the betting odds too. So player bet futures, not just like our own projections or anything. We'll talk about those. But for today, we just want to go over like some games that we like on the schedule because the schedule was released a couple weeks ago. And so there's definitely going to be some fun games this year. There's going to be, I mean, because your team and my team both won our divisions, we get to play the first place teams from the other divisions. That's just how the schedule works out. This is year 2 of having that extra game. So, and I think the NFC has that extra game at home this year. All the AFC teams are traveling. The NFC gets their 9 home games with their 8 away games. And we got where I don't know, did we have it? We didn't have international football last year, or if we did, it might have just been 1 game. But now we have 5 international games, including they're going to Germany this year, and they're going back to Mexico City like they did a few years ago, and then 3 London games. So it's just gonna be a fun season. Obviously, Jordan's team is coming off the Super Bowl, so they're looking at the repeat. Everybody in the locker room's talking about that. My team has the best odds to win the Super Bowl, so I got some high aspirations around here. It's just going to be, like I said, it's going to be a fun season. So one little tidbit, I don't know if you saw this, but did you know that the Seahawks are traveling a total of 29,446 miles this year?
Is that
Um,
all?
yeah, that's it. They're one of the teams that are going overseas. They're actually going to Germany when they play. I think they're playing. Damn, I forgot who it was. I should have wrote it down. But so obviously the traveling to Europe is adding a few miles onto
The
that.
Bucks.
They're playing the Bucks. That's the Germany game. So going over to Europe is definitely adding some miles onto that. But they're the most traveled team this year, as opposed to the Steelers, who are only traveling 6,442
Oh,
miles this year.
jeez. Like the
They're not.
Seahawks needed any more obstacles.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, at least Drew Lock and Geno Smith get to go sightsee in Germany. Actually, I want to follow up on a point that kind of kicks off of that. But before that, the Steelers go 6,442 miles. They don't even leave the Eastern time zone. That's crazy.
Really?
They go as far south as Atlanta, which is, I think, 700, 800 miles from where they are. So that's still some traveling, but they're staying in the Eastern time zone. As far west as they go is Indy, which is still technically the Eastern time zone. So that's nuts. Like all 17 of their games is in the Eastern time zone.
I wonder. I mean, to me, it seems like the odds of that happening are really low. So I wonder the last time that's happened. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's I mean, it just with the schedule how it lines up, and
Mm.
because I think I don't obviously if they play any West teams, the West teams come to them, and
Yep.
then everybody else like Cleveland, Baltimore, they play Buffalo. They play the NFC South. Like I said, they play Atlanta, so they're also playing New Orleans and Tampa, which are all in the Eastern. Well, New Orleans must come to them because they're one time zone over. So New Orleans must be in Pittsburgh, so they don't travel for that one. And then Tampa and Carolina are both in the East, so whatever one they travel to is still going to be in their time zone. Going back to the international games, another thing that I noticed this year was I actually noticed it last year with Miami after their so there was a international game because now I'm thinking about it because after the Miami's international game last year in London, they played the following week. They didn't have their
Hmm.
bye week,
Yeah.
and this year it's happening again. Like Minnesota is in London week 4 or 5, I think it is, and the following week they're playing back in the United States. So like they're not getting that extra break for the travel or anything. So it's like they're okay. It's basically just like yeah, you have an away game, but you just got to come back and prep for the next game while you're on the airplane or something like that. But it's pretty weird. Like up until last year, I think every single team that played overseas, whenever Jacksonville was over there, Jacksonville and their opponent were off the next week. Like that was their scheduled bye week,
Hmm.
and now it's I don't know, it's crazy. Any thoughts on the travel or the bye weeks?
Yeah, I mean, things like that are always interesting to me, and maybe the Vikings didn't kiss up to Roger Goodell enough, so maybe
I
that's a
think whoever
lesson
their
to them.
opponent is also playing the next week too. I forgot who they play, but Minnesota and whoever it is, they're playing week 5. Or I'll go look it up while you're talking.
No, I'm just gonna sit here and stare at you in silence instead. No,
Sweet.
yeah, I mean things like that are interesting to think. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I dealt with this a little bit when I worked in minor league baseball. I dealt with the schedule a little bit, and some of it's as simple as they can't find appropriate travel. I would think that'd be a little different in this case, but there's a lot of complexities behind the scenes, especially when you're changing time zones like that, and I can't imagine the headache they have to deal with behind the scenes. So I don't envy that position.
Yeah, so they both play. It's Vikings and Saints in week 4. Early morning football, and if you're on the West Coast, it's super early morning football.
Hmm.
And then week 5, they both play at 1 p.m. Eastern. Vikings against the Bears, Saints at home against the Seahawks. So definitely some little weirdies there, I would think. So a couple other things with the schedule that I wanted to talk about. Basically, like I said, most of the stuff that I want to talk about is going to be from week 1 because as the year goes on, we'll get into different weeks, and I don't want to just ruin the whole schedule and give you all my thoughts just from one episode. But a couple of games I'm looking forward to. Obviously, the game that kicks off the season, Bills at Rams, my team versus your team,
Terrible
Super
game.
Bowl aspiration versus Super Bowl aspiration. It's am I even using the right word? Aspiration.
Yeah, yeah, you're
Feels
doing a
like a
great
medical
job.
word. All right. Um, I mean, Trey White probably won't be back for that game, so Cooper Cup is probably going for over 300 yards that game. Allen
But the
Robinson,
over.
Allen Robinson as a quarterback to actually throw to him, as opposed to Justin Fields and the whole mess that was in Chicago last year. Um,
It's only gonna be worse. Don't worry.
Cam Akers has a full off season now. He looked rough in the playoffs last year, but um, hopefully he recovered. And if he didn't, they drafted Kyron Williams and they still got Darrell Henderson. Is Henderson? He's going in healthy, right? Probably
Yeah, he should be good to go. Yeah.
until he gets hurt. And then obviously on the Bills side, a lot of offensive firepower there. Drafting James Cook, bringing in Jamison Crowder. The last time that we saw the Bills, Gabe Davis had 4 touchdowns. Stephon Diggs has a new contract. Josh Allen is pretty much the consensus quarterback 1 in most rankings. So it's going to be a fun game, and obviously my team's involved, so I'm looking forward to seeing them kick off. I with my work schedule too, Thursday night games and Sunday night games are the 2 games that I could watch in full. where I'm not either at work or driving to work. So it'll be nice to actually be able to watch that game in full. Another game that I like is going to be Cowboys at Bucks on Sunday. I think that was is this Sunday night. That's Sunday night's game,
Mhm.
NBC. Basically, it's just a rematch of Week One's kickoff game last year. We got Amari Cooper-less Cowboys team. We got possibly a Rob Gronkowski-less Bucks team, but both offenses should be on fire. Dallas had a top defense last year. The Bucks are projected to have a top defense. They're missing a couple pieces on the defensive line. Other than that, they could have they have the potential to be a number one defense. Just overall, that should be a good game. So it's a nice way to kick off the Sunday night schedule. Bucks at Cowboys. Did I say? Yeah, actually, I had that backwards. So last year it was in Tampa. This year it's in Dallas. Another game we got Broncos at Seahawks. Now the game itself
Boo.
probably won't be that great, but it's we get to see Russ Wilson go back to where he spent most of it or all of his career so far. And that's kicking off the Monday schedule on ESPN. Broncos
Ugh.
at Seahawks. So not really much to talk about that game, aside from Russ having a nice plethora of weapons out there in Denver. And as of right now, we don't even know who's starting at quarterback for Seattle. It could be Drew Lock, could be Geno Smith. It could be some
Should have
guy
been
that,
Malik Willis, honestly.
yeah, well, it's not. Or it could be, I mean, they could find somebody down in the dumps. They could bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick if they want.
Oh gosh.
That would just boost DK Metcalf up to the moon. And then the last game we're really looking forward to in Week One. I guess technically the Broncos and Seahawks is last because that's the last game of the week. But
Oh gosh, you went all out of order.
I did. Steelers at Bengals. Bengals coming off the Super Bowl loss to the Rams. We get to see their newly improved offensive line. They did what everybody wanted them to do. They beefed up that offensive line. They got Joe Burrow some help, and like they pretty much went in a way that we didn't think the Bengals could go in. And I mean, they proved us wrong this offseason. So now let's see if they can put it all together. And
Every Bengals fan was expecting disappointment this offseason,
yeah,
and you cannot be disappointed if you're a Bengals fan.
no, not at all. I mean, they between free agency and the draft. I mean, they brought a couple guys in the draft too. So,
Yep.
and this is the Steelers' life without Big Ben. We've seen Ben miss a game here or there. We've seen him hurt, but now this is actually you're going to be going into that Week One locker room and not even have Ben there, unless he's visiting. But it's going to be. I mean, and they have some firepower on offense too. This isn't going to be like the Seahawks. We don't know who's starting there either. It could be Kenny Pickett. It could be Mitch Trubisky. But regardless, whoever's the quarterback there at least has some weapons to throw to. They have a better offensive line than the Seahawks, but they do have a defense. So at the very least, they should be able to help out their quarterback as opposed to the Seahawks just being a team that's just going to let teams just pass and run all over them.
Mhm.
But Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, they went out and got George Pickens, Najee Harris going into his second year, Pat Fryermuth. So whoever wins that quarterback competition is they have a nice set of weapons to throw it to. But to kick it off against the AFC champs, the Bengals, that's going to be a fun game in Week One, and it's a divisional game, so that's another fun thing there too.
For some reason, when you just said AFC champs, I had to think because it just seems weird that the Bengals are the
Yeah,
AFC champions. I was like, wait, what? Oh yeah, yeah, right, they are. They are. Right. You're right. You're right. Yeah, I think there's only two more that stick out to me, and we can circle back around to some of the ones that you mentioned as well. First one would probably be the Patriots and Dolphins, just because I'm intrigued overall by the Dolphins to see. I mean, you should be intrigued. There's a lot on the line here for you, but I think Tua. When you're really thinking about it, I don't know if there's a player in the league that has more pressure on them in this upcoming season than Tua, and the expectations are high. I mean, it seems crazy to me that 3 years ago we were talking about tanking for Tua, and now people are talking about whether or not Tua is even a starting quarterback in the NFL. Like, I
yeah,
mean, the absolute shift there is bizarre. I'm not giving up on him yet because I think the circumstances that he's gone through have been pretty wild. Coming off that injury, very little training camp time, COVID, and then he just kind of started getting thrown into the mix, and I think he's going to have a full off season. He's got the weapons. He's got a head coach that's been very successful calling plays and running a great offense. So all the elements are there. It's really on Tua now. If Tua wants to become an elite quarterback, there's no excuses anymore. So I think it's just a good opportunity week one to see how Bill Belichick counteracts that offense. And I think it's a good challenge for Mike McDaniel if he's able to counteract a Bill Belichick defense. So I think it could be an interesting, test of his head coaching skills right off the get go. So I think that's an interesting matchup to me. Then the other one that you didn't mention would have to be the Raiders and Chargers. The Raiders, obviously, a lot of intrigue around that team with Devontae Adams. We'll see how Josh McDaniels puts together all the pieces there in Vegas. And that has the potential to be a very high scoring game. I mean, Justin Herbert and the Chargers are going to be one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL this upcoming season. So I think there could potentially be some fireworks in that matchup, even though both defenses, I will say, are a little underrated and will probably be underrated because of the interest in their offense. But both of these defenses are pretty solid as well. So I think a big division matchup like that in week one is always fun, just to kind of gauge where each team is. Did you mention the Chiefs and Cardinals too?
No, screw those
No.
guys.
Yeah, I mean that's another game that probably has the potential for a ton of points. And anytime you have two QBs like Mahomes and Murray going at it, it's always going to be interesting. No DeAndre Hopkins, so we'll have to see who steps up for the Cardinals. I think it's Rondell Moore's time. Was kind of streaky last year, but him and Murray showed some chemistry. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that develops over the first 6 weeks of the season. But I think the Cardinals, I haven't checked recently, and I depends on how we structure it, but the win totals might be the next thing we talk about, depending on what
Yeah,
futures bets we decide to go with. But I'm very low on the Cardinals this year. They have the second toughest schedule in the NFL, so I think this is just going to be an interesting. And they got embarrassed by the Rams in the playoffs last year, so I want to see if they come out with some fire, because the only way that they're ever going to make progress is if they learn from an embarrassing loss like that. So if they come out flat, I think that tells a lot about the mentality of their team. And if we're being honest about it, I kind of question that because Kyler Murray seems kind of like a whiner to me. And Cliff Kingsbury, I don't know, he just doesn't come across as like he seems very just laid back, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I'll be interested because I think there's a lot of drama in that locker room, it seems like, behind the scenes right now with Kyler Murray
yeah,
be doing whatever he's doing. So I just think from week one, it's an interesting gauge to see, is this team serious and do they mean business coming out the gates, or are they just going to roll over like they did in the playoffs last year?
yeah. Kyler, it's going to be a huge thing with Kyler. Hopefully, he gets his deal signed, and or they
I hope he doesn't.
whether not necessarily gets a sign, but whether he gets a signed or doesn't, hopefully he's there week one. Basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because I mean that team is going to be a lot more fun with Kyler under center than without it. I couldn't even name
Oh
their
yeah.
backup quarterback right now. Those AFC or the NFC West games are going to be they'll be pretty outside of Seattle. They'll be pretty fun to watch. I mean, still like the question mark with not necessarily who's playing quarterback with San Fran, but what are we going to get a quarterback with San Fran?
Sure.
If Trey Lance is if Trey Lance is the guy starting this year, or if they're going to start with Jimmy and work Lance in, or however they work it.
Yeah, I mean
It's
a Lance and Fields matchup would be kind of interesting.
yeah. Do they play at all?
I think that's week one.
Is it? Oh yeah, it is. No, 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 no. Now you got me looking.
It's like unless I just made that up, which is completely possible, but
Yeah, Lance and Fields. You're
49ers
right.
at Bears. Okay. Yeah, good job,
All right.
Self.
Good job, Self again.
That's 2 times tonight. I'm gonna sleep well tonight.
Um, I'm really looking forward to weeks 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 11, 13, 14, 17, and 18.
Yeah, that was very quickly that you just listed off all those weeks.
all those weeks, because every single week, every single one of those weeks has at least one AFC West uh, divisional game, and I think every single game in that division is going to be
Mhm.
glorious, whether it's the Chargers versus the Raiders, or the Chiefs versus the Broncos, or the whatever combination you want to have. Those are the weeks that have at least one of those games going on,
Mhm.
and I think that, like, when your worst quarterback, and he gets a lot of hate for whatever reason, when your worst quarterback in the division is Derek Carr, and even if you don't like Carr, his
Oh.
weapons are still Hunter Renfro, Darren Waller, and Devontae Adams. So,
Are you
um,
bashing Derek Carr right now?
no, I'm a Derek Carr. I like Derek
I
Carr.
know you are.
I actually like Carr. I like Kirk Cousins. I think that they're good fantasy quarterbacks, and that's all I really care about. But
That says a lot about your personality.
I
No,
like
I'm
eyeliner.
just
Um, but when your worst quarterback in the division is a guy like Derek Carr,
Yeah.
when other divisions have Daniel Jones and freaking Geno Smith, um, you know that, like you're gonna get some good games. You're gonna get some good offense. There's wide receivers across the board in that division. I mean, KC, obviously they lost Hill, but brought in Juju and MVS. Josh Gordon is, I mean, he's still around. He's going into a full offseason with the Chiefs, and he was there last year, so he has a little bit of the playbook. Probably using it as an ashtray, but they overall, like, that division. Whenever you have a chance to watch a game from that division, or if your team's on bye and it's one of those weeks where that there's two divisional teams going off against each other from the AFC West, watch it. I mean, I don't think we're going to get a. I would. I mean, unless they, like, bring the overs up to, like, over 70 points, I think, like, I'm probably going to go a lot more overs than unders in those divisional games.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty strong possibility. What did Geno Smith ever do to you? I feel like you're very much picking on him, but
He was he was the best quarterback from his draft class.
that's very embarrassing. It's one of those things, it's like tell me you're trying to not win without telling me that you're not trying to win, and it's just a picture of Geno Smith as your starting quarterback, because that's
Well,
what it feels like
I
with the
bet he knows the
Seahawks.
system because it's a new coach, but he knows the guys on the team at least. So it's like, and he's had a little bit, not
He is a guy, I will give
he
him that.
he doesn't have winning success, but he does have some chemistry with DK Metcalf, I guess.
He was okay last year. I mean, he's the definition of a backup quarterback. To me, it's just unbelievable. You could have been a little more aggressive. I mean, they should start Drew Lock first of all, but if they don't, I mean, they really should have been more aggressive in finding literally anybody else on the planet. So to me, it feels like I know it's a strong QB class next year. It just feels they're not tanking, but it feels like a just a lack of effort on their part.
I don't know if you could say that they're not tanking, but they're not going to be good. They're going to be
Yeah,
picking. They're definitely going to be picking top five, and that's like,
and that's why I said earlier, they have such a huge hill to climb. I mean, that division is tough, their schedule is tough. You have the travel, you have a terrible team. I mean, they're gonna be in the running for the number one pick. And I mean, I don't think that Pete will have those guys playing at number one overall pick level. So, maybe you see them in fifth instead of first, but I
yeah,
don't know,
it's
man.
you have to kind of see who else is on their schedule to see where they can squeeze out a couple wins. But it's I don't think, yeah, you're right. They don't really have like 0-17 potential, but they do. You're not going to get there's going to be more blowouts than there's going to be anything else, and you're not going to get a
It
lot of
feels like
wins
a
out of them.
4 or 5 win team. I don't
4 or
probably
5
something.
win, few, like, even week one. We mentioned that the Broncos with Russ Wilson going back there, and ideally in Seattle in September, it's going to be decent weather unless it's
Yeah.
raining, and you're not going to. So it shouldn't be real weathery. You're going to get Russ should be able to do whatever he wants on that field on that Sunday
Yeah, you would think so.
or
On a
Monday for
side
Monday
note, I
night.
didn't even get to comment on the Rams, but I am very excited to be able to enjoy opening night in LA. So I'm very excited about. I mean, you and I talked forever ago that this was most likely going to be the first game. It just makes sense because usually the defending champs get opening night, and when you're looking at their best home matchups, it was either the Bills or the Cowboys, but the Cowboys had opening night last year, correct?
Yeah, against
Maybe.
Tampa.
Yeah, it was them. So I didn't think they were going to do that back to back year. So it seemed a little too obvious, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited for that matchup. It's going to be a good, it's fun. I mean, a lot of people are picking that to be the Super Bowl. I was scrolling through some articles this morning, which I mean, I guess it could be. I think the Rams' path is a lot easier than the Bills. The AFC is ridiculous this year, and I don't envy any. I don't know. I'm sure gonna make our Super Bowl predictions sometime in the future. I have absolutely no idea. I might just get a dartboard and throw a dart for the AFC because it legitimately could be like 10 different teams. If you told me any of the top teams, 10 teams in the AFC, were gonna make the championship game and win it all, I would believe you.
Yeah, it's like I said, that's my most fun game that I'm looking forward to. Um, but I've given you my thoughts on like even before the schedule came out. So I'll say it to everybody, like I personally don't think it should have been this game this early. But my reasoning wasn't because that like I don't.
Because you hate good football.
No, it's not that I don't want like either team to start off 0-1 because I mean that's definitely that's going to happen obviously unless they both tie. But they like we're as football fans, whether you're a fantasy football fan or overall football fan, whatever kind of football fan you are, you're waiting all summer for football to start, right? And you know that the Rams are going to be there week one on that Thursday night. And now they didn't have the greatest of opponents to really choose from. I think Carolina was there on the list. I think the Saints might have been there on the list for their home
Yeah.
teams.
Hmm.
Obviously, San Fran and Seattle, and then that other team that they got in their division. But they so the Bills were definitely the most intriguing on the list. But you know people are going to be tuning in no matter who the team is. Now, obviously, the NFL doesn't want to throw in a team like Carolina who might not give you the same amount of effort on the other side of the ball and be like a 30-10 game or whatever. That's kind of boring football, unless you're a Rams fan. But whoever the opponent was, people are going to be tuning in. So you don't really need the ratings for that Thursday night because you're going to get them. You know what I mean? And save that Bills Rams game for later on in the season. Now, obviously, as the season goes on, injuries happen. We could be missing potentially a Josh Allen or a Matt Stafford because of injuries throughout the year. And then that would make that game kind of suck later on. But like I said, you're gonna get views week one, regardless of who the matchup is. So why not save that marquee matchup for a little bit later on? That was my only beef with it. I mean, I'm glad it's happening. Hopefully, we can come out strong and take the W on the road. But
I mean,
I
that's
would
what
have
it
been fine
sounds
with
like to me.
anybody.
I think you're scared, and that's okay
Yeah,
to admit to everybody that you're scared. We can talk about it if you need to. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. But I mean, historically, it's just like I feel like it's almost a tradition. I mean, yes, the ratings will be strong, but would they be as strong as the Bills and Rams? No, they wouldn't be. I mean, no matter what, yes, you'll have the viewership, but a game like that's going to bring it doesn't matter what time of year this game was on. If anything, both teams are completely healthy. You could roll the dice that Josh
nope,
Allen
not
and
Trey
Matthew
White. We should
Stafford.
have played in week 4 when Trey White would
No,
be back.
screw it. Nobody
Now,
cares
now
about Trey
Cooper
White.
Cup's gonna run for or receive for 300 yards.
Yeah, I hope he does. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, no, I don't. I mean, I see where you're coming from, but I think that people are excited, but it also builds up anticipation for the rest of the season if that game is strong. I mean,
Yeah,
if the first thing, it's people always talk about first impressions. If your first impression was the Rams murdering the Panthers on opening night, you're just kind of like, okay. I mean, but you see a great Bills and Rams game, you're like, I'm ready to go this season. Let's keep it rolling. And you're excited about it. Where if you're an intense enough football fan, it's really not going to matter how good the first game is. You're still
you're
into it,
watching
but
them all. Yep.
there's still. I think this is more targeting a casual fan who's like, oh, that might be a good game. I'll check it out at least. So yeah, I see both sides of it, but
It'll be a good game. We got a pretty rough first six, not overall first
Oh, I
six
don't
weeks,
want
but
to hear
like
it. The Rams have the toughest schedule in the
within the
NFL
first
next year,
within the
so
first 6 weeks, we got a couple of our Achilles heels on our schedule. We got the Rams, the Titans, who seem to have our number in the regular season, the Chiefs, who we just can't seem to get out of our own way. Um, but it's gonna be a fun season overall. It's like just going into this year with as high as like the league is on Buffalo being a Super Bowl favorite. It's a different feeling, you know. Like we've been good for a couple of years now, but now like it's just starting to take notice, and Josh Allen is just winning the league over. Um, Unfortunately, I don't want to get too much into what happened last Saturday with the stuff here in Buffalo, but like it's just in the community. The Bills are here in the community and just there for the people, and hopefully we just come out strong and finish strong.
yeah, I mean, Josh Allen is basically the mayor there now. Every comment
Yeah,
I see about any situation, including that one, is just what Josh Allen thinks, and I'm like, this, I just is kind of, I don't know. He is a legend there already, and he hasn't even won anything for him, so good for him. But the welcome to the top, though, that's what it feels like. It's
yeah,
pressure. There's expectations. It's
been a
not,
while.
oh, we're gonna just be a bottom feeder and have fun picking in the top 5 next year. It's a new feeling. Congratulations.
We've never picked in the top. Well, we picked in the top five
I
once. We've always been mediocre. We've never been
Okay,
good,
I'm
but we weren't
sorry.
bad.
I'm sorry. The 10th overall pick.
That's better. All right. So I think that's going to do it for today's show. The Carolina Hurricanes ended up putting an empty netter in there, so they won 2-0. So now they go into Madison Square Garden on Sunday with a 2-0 series lead. Like I said, I'm probably going with the Rangers. I would have gone with the Rangers even at 1-1, but now that it's 2-0, I'm probably going with the Rangers just because I don't think they're going to go down 3-0 in the series. And then as we were talking, Calgary also took a 1-0 lead. I'll double check and make sure that's what we're ending at. See if they score. Oh, they did. So it's 2-0 Flames halfway through the first. So that's shaping out to either be another rough night for Edmonton or another nice comeback for Edmonton. But
And the
one,
Warriors took the lead.
yeah, wow, that's crazy. So all home teams are taking care of business right now with Carolina winning already, Flames up 2-0 at home, and Golden State has a 5-point lead. As I'm saying this right now, the score probably changed. But that's going to be it. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. We're going to start getting into more NFL stuff as the offseason goes on. We're getting every time that we come on, it's getting closer to the NFL season. So just think about that. See you guys.